Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Open Concept Podcast, where we are breaking down unnecessary walls and barriers that stand in the way of greatness. Our guest today, Talor Stewart, joining us all the way from Vermont, founder of Conscious Home Design, also author of the book Conscious Home Design, is here to chat with us today about everything architecture, and what I think it really means to through his lens of living and designing a home that's meaningful to the way that we live life. Talor, I'm excited to have you here today, man. I really appreciate your time. Welcome to the show.
Brandon, hey, thank you very much. Glad to be here. I really enjoy the opportunity to go a little deeper into this very esoteric subject with people. It's really about, I think everybody today knows about the mind-body connection, unless they're living a completely unconscious life, everybody knows that there's sort of symbiotic connection there. And my job as the architect is to help people put the mind-body environment connection to work for them in a powerful way, so that they can really, go beyond, style and preference, and do the things that the data tells us, scientific data actually says makes people live happier and even longer lives. I think everyone is out there waving a flag. Hey, we'll help you live your best life, but what does best life actually mean? What does that look like? What are some metrics that we can actually target, and measure against? And so conscious home design is a framework and methodology to look at those parameters.
I want to get into some of the science, but I do want to make the comment first that if you are and you do understand that the mind and body are connected, and I just want to paint this picture of anyone that has gone to a place where they've just whether they feel connected to nature, connected to their environment, whether it's a quiet place at the beach in the morning or at the top of a mountain, but you just feel this sense of you're alive. There's more to it than just you're a human being on earth. Like, you do feel connected, and that feeling is really driven a lot by the environment and the space that's created in between, the connection between the mind and that environment and the soul. And what I love about what you do and the message that you're trying to get across is that feeling of being connected to that environment can happen at the home. And so that can happen more often than not. You don't have to go searching for a beach and a sunrise in the morning, although I'm not discouraging anybody to go and do that because it's a beautiful thing. But that sense, that feeling of connection, of inspiration, that can really come from an environment that's really just right over top of your head if you do it correctly.
Yeah, so here's what's true. I mean, there's so much to unpack there, Brandon. We're really it's a very meaty subject. The environment plays a huge factor in shaping our lives, and to the degree that we can control our environment, we can control and shape our destiny, and sort of play an active hand in how our future, unfolds. Without architecture, everything that we accomplished would be limited to what you could do on a sunny afternoon, because as soon as the weather changed or wild animals came, it would just mess everything up, And so architecture, the ability to control our environment and dedicate space to our activities allows us to build on yesterday's achievements. And so, every great thing that we've done, from science to art to technology or medicine, all of these human endeavors are made possible in large part by the built environment. And so there's definitely a direct cause effect relationship there. And so, if, Winston Churchill said, we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. And so we want to intentionally shape them so that they're shaping us according to the destiny that we want to achieve, the goals that we want to target, so that we have flow, and it's actually our built environment is an asset rather than an obstacle course, and a hindrance to us achieving our desired outcome. So the good news is that what data tells us we should be hitting is possible for everyone, even if you're living in a rental and have no plans to do a major renovation or build a new home or anything, And so that's wonderful news. So even people who are thinking, why am I listening to an architect? I don't have any plans to hire an architect. How is this conversation relevant to me? The truth is that there are things that we can share and cover today that are going to be directly applicable and materially tangible and beneficial to anyone tuning in. And so, because we're spending so much time in our homes, prior to the pandemic, when people weren't working from home, people were still spending around half their lives on average. There's busy periods where you're out of the house more often, but if you look at the full scope of your life, people are spending at least half their lives in their home. But for those people who are working from home, they're spending 90% of their time in their home. And so, it really does play a factor, like that tree root that moves the concrete sidewalk. Cement is harder than wood, and yet the wood wins from constant 24/7 slow, unrelenting pressure. And so, you know, the human will is indomitable. We can overcome anything in a moment, like the Olympics, we're breaking records all the time, and you find these people digging deep and through hard work and discipline, but also just deep drawing on their desire and their will, and how ferociously they want something. They can overcome these seemingly impossible challenges and obstacles. But these are like breach moments, like you see the whale just launch itself out of the ocean, we're not all the time living at those 100% volume all the way turned up moments. We're in most of life, we're trying to economize. We're going through life on habit, because we're trying to conserve resources and energy. It already takes 20% of our calories just to think. And if we had to consciously make a choice about every single thing we did all day long, we'd never get anything done. Like we have to be able to filter things out. We rely on habits to make decisions for us, so that we can save our precious resources for the big life or death choices that we may have to come across. And so, because yes, the mind is so powerful and the human will is indomitable, but only in those moments. And when we're spending our time in our homes where we may be tired, or we may have just be going on autopilot, that's when the environment is going to exert its influence on us. And so that's why it's so important to shape it in a way that's beneficial to us. I believe that understanding a little bit more about how our homes can can support us well, that, again, that body mind environment connection. I believe that understanding a little bit more about that is an essential life skill. Just like knowing how to dress for the weather or prepare a well-balanced, nutritious meal, it's going to serve you very well as you go through the years of your life.
I love how you touched on habits as well, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
our future version of us is often defined by the habits that we instill in our day to day right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned 20% of our calories and effort is just exerted on thinking and making choices. But if we can
Mm-hmm.
eliminate and put in frameworks in place to eliminate a lot of those choices, and just
Mm-hmm.
be able to show up and habitually tackle these tasks, it's going to take far less effort. And that's why, coaching for me, that's been something, hiring coaches over the years, different business coaches, fitness coaches, etc. I found is really helpful. It's like, I know what I need to do, but I need somebody to, to design that meal plan for me. Just tell me what I need to eat. Like, I don't want to think about
Mm-hmm.
going and doing all the shopping if I
Mm-hmm.
want to, match my macros against my fitness plan. Like, show me what I need to lift and I'll lift it. Show me what I need to eat and I'll eat it. Just like every day, build that out
Mm-hmm.
for me. Cool. And now I don't have to think about it because I know
Yeah.
I can go to the grocery store. I have the list of things that I'm going to buy. I go to the gym. I don't have to think about, what am I doing today? I open up the plan. This is what I'm doing. All right. That took very little effort. Now I just got to show up and do it. But
Mm-hmm.
when you don't have a plan in place and you are just sort of freewheeling it, a lot of that, similar to design, right? We get into projects where homeowners, they don't have a full design in their head and they're kind of working through making some of these choices as they go, which is not what we recommend. But they feel like they can be a part of that process and that decision making process throughout the construction phases. Once we get started, is a difficult thing because it does expel a lot of energy. It's
Mm-hmm.
time, it's commitment in the calendar, it's commitment in the brain when you want to be thinking about everything else, and it's when you should be focusing on taking your kids to sports and or they're helping them out with their homework or focusing on the work that you have to do that you're really good
Yeah.
at versus trying to make all of these choices in design as you go. But it really does tie up a lot of time and brain power. So to have some sort of structure when making these decisions is, I think, it's certainly been life changing for me to put
Sure.
that kind of structure into my life. And I find that there's a lot of
Real quick before we get back to the show, if you have heard anything on this podcast that has resonated with you or if it's helped you in any way, appreciate more than anything in the world if you could go hit that subscribe button or leave us a review. It helps us tremendously. I want to go back to being able to continue to serve and do more and more and help out and get bigger and bigger guests on, better and better. The only way that I can do that is with your help. I'm so honored to be here. Let's get back to the show. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.
freedom in that.
So there's so much to unpack with. I mean, you touched on so many points. Each one of them is a podcast episode all by itself. But I'll try to like grab some of the real salient points to touch on in response. One is the quality of your questions determine the quality of your results. Ask good questions, you have better outcomes, right? Better questions lead to better results. And so, the conscious home design methodology is about clarity and economizing. All right, people have decision fatigue. There's no shortage of shiny objects to look at on Pinterest or Instagram. They're like, oh wow, look at that room. There's magazines are full of eye candy. There's lots of bling to look at, and it's like you can get distracted chasing these different things and end up with this hodgepodge of a house that doesn't work. Because it's like all these different, it's too eclectic. And so how do you tie that all together? And so working with experts, shortcuts are time to success. Sure, you can figure stuff out on your own and get somewhere, but when you hire a coach, to your point of working with a professional as a personal trainer or a coach or a mentor, someone to show you the ropes and set things up and help you avoid the pitfalls and give you a roadmap, it's like your success is going to be accelerated by doing that. Seth Godin said he coined the 10,000 hour rule of thumb. Hey, put in 10,000 hours, and obviously some subjects are more complex than others. Rocket science is going to take maybe more than 10,000 hours. Accounting, a little bit less than that. But I'm not saying accounting less than 10,000, but less than rocket science.
Yeah.
So there's obviously different depending on the subject you're involved in. But this rule of thumb of 10,000 hours is a nice sort of benchmark. And for people that aren't in the profession, in the design or architecture or construction profession, they're not going to spend 10,000 hours learning about how to do their house. It's not possible. And so people that are trying to go it alone of course they're going to get bogged down in decision fatigue, and they're going to figure out, how am I going to do this, and they're going to they're going to be really enthusiastic and want all these things, but in the end it's going to break down without a system or methodology or a guide to walk them through to help safely and quickly, effectively navigate that. So conscious home design is about so the book I wrote, which is sort of the big nuggets, the big idea, the things, the essential things that everyone wants to know for building their home. Not a how-to guide, but how will it best fit me? How will it best serve my personal growth and development and happiness. And then the workbook that goes with it is the framework where you ask those questions. It's about asking the right questions so we leave no stone unturned. Because oftentimes people come to a new home project or a renovation project and they have their wish list. They know, oh, I want this and this and this, and I had this in the past and that didn't work, so I definitely want to avoid that. They have their do's and their don'ts, but again, because they haven't put in 10,000 hours studying, the nuances of home design, there may be questions that they didn't ask, they forgot to ask, or they didn't even know that they were supposed to ask or could ask to begin with. And so my job is to ask those questions, to draw that desire out of them so that I can give it to them, and so, because I've had people call me up. I had a hedge fund guy call me up. He just spent 2 years and over $2 million building his dream home. And they moved in. He and his family had been living there for just 6 months, and called me up and said, "Hey, this doesn't work for us. It doesn't flow, And so now he's staring down the barrel of a 6-figure renovation, plus having to move out and deal with all the mess up and fix it, and permitting and dust and lining up a contractor again, and just all that chaos just to fix what they should have done right the first time. And I said, why didn't you hire me at the beginning? He said, oh, I thought I was being smart by saving some money, and I just picked a nice fancy set of pre-done plans out of a catalog and hired a local builder. And so it wasn't the contractor's fault. Contractor did a great job delivering, but the project didn't work for them. And so I thought, wow, with the cost, forget about the hassle, just the cost of the renovations to fix it, that would have more than paid for my fee. And so rather than having a fixed house that's good enough, you would have had something so much better to begin with. And so making decisions during construction or after construction is the worst time to make them. We want to make all of our choices, our design choices, before. And if you don't follow a framework and create a strong benchmark about why every design choice ties back into that based on your values, then you're going to very easily get distracted. And you might sign off on a design that doesn't fully meet you, and you don't realize it until you move in or see it being built and go, oh my God, wait, and so the conscious home design methodology is designed to prevent those changes on the fly. It's about confidence, and because clarity is confidence and confidence is speed. And so if you find that clients aren't signing off on design choices, they're dragging their feet or whatever, it's probably because they're not clear in their mind about what they're signing off or what the value of it is going to get for them. And so once they have clarity and they know, oh, here's why we do this, here's why it's important, here's how it helps me in the long run, here's how it's going to help me live my best life based on X, Y, and Z, then it's so much easier to move forward. The best client is an educated client. And so that's really the proper process, and everybody is enriched because of it. It's easier for the builder to deliver a project, on time, and on budget. And it's easier for them because they move in faster and they get a better product in the end, and they can more quickly move on to that happily ever after phase of life.
We talk a lot about values here on the podcast, and I've had a number of different business owners on, and we've talked about core values, and we've talked about how that impacts their decisions against their ability to hire, fire, promote. generally like how to deal with people, how to make decisions, how to transition people, either upwards, downwards, whatever. But one of the things that we talk about is core values are not just words on a wall. They really are defined by the standards that you uphold. And core values are something that come through and are lived every single day and practiced every single day. But I would be curious about values when it comes to the home. So for somebody, if you're a business owner, you've probably understood, if you've read, any sort of book on leadership or any sort of book on business, you're probably pretty familiar with core values and the impact that they can have on your staff, on your clients, on your processing, on your vision. But when it comes to home, for somebody that's looking to build a home or renovate a home, and they've never been through a values exercise before to understand how this is going to start to shape their decisions, what would you do to walk them through to start to understand what their values are, and what are you looking for, and what are you listening for in order to put a design in place in your mind or on paper that is going to start to reflect those values? Would you be able to give us an example?
Yeah, sure. So the Conscious Home Design Workbook has a series of exercises. So look, I am not, a doctor. I'm not a coach. I'm not a therapist. There's certain things, there's limits to what I can help people with. But I do want people to have, a cohesive life. I want people to feel like they're in flow, in a flow state, or in harmony, or feeling connected as much as possible, connected to their own center and self-worth and value, but also connected to the world around them, the people they live with, for starters, but then also the ripples that as they go out. And so the Conscious Home Design Workbook was something that I worked on. I hired someone who has a dual master's degree, master's in social work, who worked in government and had a team underneath, and so understands policy and sort of bigger picture stuff, but then went back to school and got a second master's degree in psychotherapy, and works now one-on-one with clients, helping them, navigate their lives. And so this sort of big picture, but also the nitty-gritty individual, this person was ideal. And so read the book, and then together I said, hey, here's the big nuggets, here's the big picture in the book that we want to deliver for people. How can we ask the right questions? Let's set up some simple, thoughtful but fun exercises that people can do in this workbook, to draw out the important stuff. And so together we created that. And the core values worksheet is one of the exercises in conscious home design. And so we specifically say, what are your values? And we prime it. We say it could be this, we give them some keywords that they can draw from, and sort of kind of target, sort of mind map out where they're going. And people, one person may say, I'm really about freedom and justice and equality. Another person, because I'm all about fun, family, and adventure. Those are two very different core sets of core values, and how that shows up in the home or in your architecture, it could be diverse, right? I mean, a person who's interested in justice and security and equanimity might have a very balanced and almost fortress-like feel to a home, sort of temple or castle. Someone who's into adventure and freedom and fun, they're experience, they might have a lot more color, or they might have unexpected features, like a fireman's pole, from one floor to the next, or any number of things you could do to exemplify that spirit, that spirit of playfulness. And so one of the things that we do, for a home where you have multiple sort of values, because you don't want one person driving the whole project. I would like everyone in the household, even the kids, to do the conscious home design worksheets, along with their parents, because once we understand what everybody wants, it's so much easier to deliver a home that everyone's going to be happy with. Because if you just have one person driving the design, because they happen to be the one with the more free time, or the one who just takes the lead because they have, the desire, or they have, for whatever reason, that's fine. There can certainly be a primary point of contact in a project. There always is. But if that person designs the house in the style that they love, and yet they're trying to, the family room, and their stated goal is to have quality connection time with the people they live with, but everyone else hates that room because no one else likes orange walls, then it defeats the purpose, right? And so finding a way to balance the ticket, so to speak, or here's an example, like an extreme example, like if you have a heterosexual couple, and neither, a woman is not going to want to live in Castle Grayskull, and a guy is not going to want to live in Barbie Cloud Palace, right? And so how can you create a bedroom that's going to feel comfortable and natural, and supportive to both that masculine and that feminine, energy, right? And so finding that the balance of how to structure people's values so that there's a harmonious blending, that's part of the art of design and architecture. It's definitely a worthwhile pursuit, for sure.
What would you say after people have gone through this workbook? Because as an architect, right, you can get this idea book, and you get the couples, and they said, you know what, I like this house, I like this house, I like this house, I like this house, and they're all very different. So for you to sit down and start designing a home for somebody that you need some direction, right? And I would ask you, how much more direction, how often are you getting it right closer to the first time after people have gone through this workbook and this exercise, because you now have this much more information versus going through design, different design iterations, and scaling back, and moving things forward and scaling back and changing things as you go, because you didn't really have maybe a solid grasp on what those values were beforehand. So how often after you have this information are we like, all right, this is enough to really get it right the first time, and you bring it back and your clients are pretty happy with it, versus if they don't go through this exercise, we're kind of working back and forth quite a few times. You know what I'm getting with that, right? Like,
I
how
totally know what you're talking
yeah,
about.
so how
The process. Yeah.
I guess what I'm
Again,
trying to ask is, like, how valuable is this to your clients, without asking you that
It's
direct
going back
question?
to what I mentioned before of clarity is confidence, and confidence is speed. And so, when people come into it and they're not sure, and they just have these vague ideas, or they see a bunch of styles that they like, it doesn't really narrow things down very, very well. And so, conscious home design is not a style guide. There's plenty of talented designers out there that, that can focus on their design style. They're artists. And people just either swipe left or swipe right. Hey, I like it, or I don't like it, and so that's how they choose, their designer. Um, my approach is different. It's more of an inside out. I assume that you're going to get a style that you like in the end. Of course, we're going to deliver, colors and textures and lines that are appealing to your aesthetic preference. But you could have the most beautiful, high value, brand name designer outfit. But if it's 3 sizes wrong, then it's not going to serve you very well. And so let's make sure that the project fits first. Let's focus on the program. And once we know that we have size appropriate spaces in the right adjacencies, you don't want the kitchen right next to the bedrooms, because you don't want your clothes to smell like cooking, and certain things. Some things need integration, some things need separation and isolation. Once you figure all that stuff out, and you have enough spaces and they're size appropriate, then you can start focusing on the design preferences and the choices there. So it's about, there was a YouTube video. Some high school teacher, I think, I saw it 10 or 15 years ago. He was um, he had a jar on his desk, and he had a bunch of stones and pebbles and sand, and it was about priorities, and he was telling the class, hey, look, if you put all the sand in first, there won't be room for the big important rocks, so put the rocks in first, and then you can fill in the other things, and then everybody fits, very happily at the end. Conscious home design says, look, what are the universal principles that we know make people happy? Is it's we need more than just shelter. I mean, the basic program of shelter is, for the last 100 years, is kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, hangout space. It's basically four functions, that are done. And sure, if you're homeless, then getting those things is going to make you tremendously happy, and it's going to increase your life expectancy, and it's going to optimize your potential. But once you've achieved that baseline shelter, cooking, bathing, sleeping, and hangout space, then there's nothing about that's going to inherently guarantee happiness or success or fulfillment in life, right? You're just living at sort of your physical needs are taken care of, but nothing to feed your higher needs, like the hierarchy of human needs pyramid. Our needs for love and connection and respect, our needs for personal growth and development, feel like we're getting better at something, feel like we're stretching into a higher potential for ourselves. Creative expression needs, our need to just do something, to generate something, whether it's just a hobby for ourselves or whether it's something that other people enjoy or value. That's an individual decision, but everyone has a creative need to express something. And so finding room for those in your life, in your home particularly, because if it's not in your home, then um, you may or may not find it outside of the home, or it's like if you have a home gym, it's so much easier to work out at home than, have to go drive 30 minutes across town to get to the gym and brave traffic. It's if you're pressed for time or whatever. Obviously, going to the gym, you're putting yourself in an environment. It can help you stay on target because of that influence of the others around you. But it comes at a cost of friction because the travel time and getting there. And so having it in your home, can be a fallback to, it can remove a friction point and make it easier to maintain your exercise goals, for example. But whether it's your creative expression, all the different needs, all the different activities, again, like dedicating space to our activities is going to allow us to have success. Leonardo da Vinci he painted the Mona Lisa 500 years ago, and it took him over a decade to finish that piece of art. And if he didn't have an art studio, if he didn't have a space dedicated to the creation of that, then he might not have finished it, because he was busy doing other projects, paid commissions, or maybe he didn't have inspiration, so by having an art studio, he was able to just come back to it when he had moments of inspiration or when he had gaps in his other work. And so we all know that it takes time and effort to become accomplished at anything. Back to that 10,000 hours, hey, practice makes perfect. That's common sense. But what's missing from that common sense formula is it also takes space. We need space to do the things that we want to do. And so when you dedicate space for activities that you say are important to me, hey, this feeds me. This is valuable to me. This is a part of who I am and how I show up. When you dedicate space to that activity in your home, not only does it set up a positive feedback loop where your environment is sending a signal back to your mind, to your to your conscious, but also your subconscious mind, hey, my life is possible. The things that matter to me, I'm able to pursue them, and so that sets up a positive feedback loop of hope, and optimism, and feeling like, hey, life works for me. I'm able to pursue my dreams. Not only does it just set up a positive feedback loop, but it also physically removes a friction point and gives you the opportunity to actually do that thing. And so you're more likely to actually reach your goals if you have the spatial opportunity to pursue them. And so that's the whole thing. That's where we begin, is identifying what those pieces are and finding a way to allocate space. Conscious home design doesn't say you have to have a 5,000 or 6,000 square foot home to get everything you want to do in there. I mean, we can do a very good job, for a single person or a well-aligned couple in just 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, or in square meters. And if you're thinking that way, let's talk about 300 square meters. That's
We're still square
it's
feet
just
here.
how you arrange the space. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I love what you said. I'm writing a book right now and writing a framework, and it's funny, right? Because I can pull up my laptop at home. I won't get anything done. I have my office. I can sit down in there and I can pull it out, and I won't get anything done in the
Mm-hmm.
creative writing space. But then
Mm-hmm.
I go to a coffee shop or a collaborative work area like a
Mm-hmm.
WeWork or something along those lines,
Mm-hmm.
put my headphones in, and just something about the energy around me, it
Yeah.
allows me to just, I'm not talking to anybody, there's more people there. It's not, I'm not sitting in a quiet library with headphones on, earplugs in, like narrow
Mm-hmm.
glasses, just 100% focus. It's actually, I'm in an environment that I feel more creative, and I'm able to really make
Mm-hmm.
some improvement. Now it may take me 10
Mm-hmm.
minutes to drive from my house to the coffee shop or wherever that I'm working, or 30 minutes to the collaborative space where arguably I could just post up and do it anywhere. But the amount of momentum that I get when I'm in the right environment, towards the
Mm-hmm.
right direction and towards those goals, is huge. So for me, I would
Mm-hmm.
rather get in my truck, drive the 10 minutes to the coffee shop, even though I have lots of other spaces where I could sit down and do this, because I know that's where I'm going to get the most work done in that particular context. So
Sure.
I really love what you said about just the power of the environment and the location, just to stimulate whatever it is that you're trying to get done, right? If it's homework at the kitchen table, whether you're Da Vinci at looking to paint the Mona Lisa, but having some space there, uh, to really exemplify what it is that you're doing, that's in your heart, that's in your soul, is going to allow you to really move towards some of those goals that you're looking to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Or not even necessarily the
Mhm.
goals that you're looking to achieve, but also feeling the way that you're seeking to feel in those spaces. That's essentially what we're trying to achieve a lot of the time.
Yeah, so a lot of architecture, because you see it and you interact with it and you touch it, a lot of it does feel like it's about style, or it's about design, it's about texture and color and materiality and stuff. And so it is largely about those. But ultimately, from my perspective, it's not about those. Ultimately, it's about human experience. And so, in the same way that poetry is not about paper and ink, you know, uh, that's the medium that poetry is delivered, in a book. I mean, it could be orally delivered, but I mean, commonly, it's, you get a book on poetry and it's printed out. So it's not about pages and ink. And yes, it can be well designed. We choose our fonts, we choose our covers. Is it slippery and soft to touch, or is it rustic and rugged to touch? There's an experience with the book, and just the same way with our houses. But the deeper experience is, what are you actually, um, what chord is being struck in your inner being, in your mind, or in your heart, from going through that. So that's what architecture. So architecture is not about sticks and bricks, just like poetry is not about paper and ink. It's about the experience that's being cultivated. And Winston Churchill, that Winston Churchill quote, we shape our buildings after they shape us. That's wisdom of the West, but the same wisdom lives in the East. Yogananda said, environment is stronger than willpower. And that works on two levels. If at first, when I heard that, I kind of resisted. I was like, wait a second, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to feel like I don't have strong enough will to overcome my environment or to achieve my dreams. I resisted that. But I said, okay, look, he's not lying. This is someone who has some wisdom. So how is it true? Why could that, what he's saying, be true? And so as I meditated more on it and thought about it, I found that, well, look, if you want to become a doctor, you shouldn't be spending all your time hanging out with uh, poker players, card players, you're going to learn that skill, but you're not going to learn much about medicine hanging out with them. So hanging out with other medical students or other medical professionals is going to smooth the way and make it much more easy for you to become a medical professional yourself. Not only because the conversation is going to gear around the subject that you're wanting to study, but also the interest and the momentum. Someone said, "Show me your five." You're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. Both economically, but also mentally. In terms of the value systems and the belief systems that you hold, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, environment being stronger than will, there's a social element to that, of course, but there's also a physical element to that. And when you put yourself in an environment where everyone is going in the same direction, like, hey, I'm going to the gym, everyone there has this consciousness of optimizing the body, efficiency, then that you can pick up on that trend, that consciousness trend, and even if you're not really in the mood and you're just going through the motions, oh, I'm just trudging, but as soon as you get there and feel that energy, that spirit, it can get you into the mood, or a concert. Hey, we're all going to this music concert, or, it's like drafting, the Tour de France. People get in their bicycle packs because the guys in front are breaking the wind, and so the guys behind don't have to pedal as hard. And so when we put ourselves into an environment, whether it's full of other people or whether it's your home studio where you've gone every day, and every time you go into that space, you turn on a certain mindset, that space is going to somehow charge up with that kind of intention. And so just by putting yourself in that environment, it will help get you in the mood. It will tune your frequency to that resonance, if that makes sense.
Totally.
There's a Pavlovian thing to that, just like, hey, walking into the bedroom, can trigger sleepiness. Walking to the kitchen can trigger an appetite response. Going to the TV room is gonna generate, conversation consciousness, right? So there's a Pavlovian response to these associations with these different rituals and activities in the spaces, but there's also some sort of energetic kind of charge that happens beyond that, I believe. Almost like a space is a battery, and it holds a charge. And so, if you have a meditation space, just keep it as a meditation space. Don't go in there and do other things. If you have I'm a strong believer of dedicated space for the specific activities, because for that reason. And so
Yeah.
you're saying for yourself, it's proven true in your experience. You also sound like an extrovert, where if you're having a hard time getting things done at home, but you go to a busy environment and you feel the buzz, that gets you going. So that's something that, as an extrovert, a home office may be a very challenging thing for you because you're not getting the stimulation that feeds you. And so if you were in a situation where you did have to spend a lot of time at home, I would look to say, okay, how can we do a number of things that are going to help you find that flow state, even though you are alone, and focused. Different people have different expectations. Some people, that think of a cathedral ceiling, it gives you that loft, that soaring, that inspiration, that lift, right? But Einstein said he preferred low ceilings and tight spaces for studying because he found it like a magnifying glass. It helped him focus his concentration in on a specific thing rather than expand. It's a concentration thing. And so these are two different experiences that architecture can facilitate for people. And so it's just finding what works for the individuals that are actually going to be living there. You may look at a picture on Instagram and say, "Oh, I love that vaulted ceiling," but it may not actually be the very best space for your desired activity. And so let's just that's what the core values worksheet is about, and the conscious home design worksheets are about, is to help identify those particular things so that you don't get distracted by shiny objects and bling and end up with something that doesn't work for you in the end.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned being an extrovert. For people that may
Yeah.
know me from a bit of a distance, they would think that I'm an extrovert. But me knowing me long enough, I've realized that I am very much an introvert. I just have
Okay.
extra extroverted tendencies. So it does take some
Yeah.
effort, and in certain environments, I've figured out how to really harness that and kind of what I can get done when I put in those environments. And I love what you said about the being a result of your environment and the result of the five people that you spend the most amount of time with. And I used to believe that that was the case. And then podcasts came out and social media came out. So I changed my way of thinking about that to the five people that are influenced the most by. So not necessarily spending time in proximity with them, but who you let influence you. That could be who you listen to in social media, who you listen to on podcasts, who you watch on YouTube. But if you're become a result of their way of thinking, if you're thinking that way. And then down the road, I changed that thought again to actually, I believe that you become a result of the five people of the expectation of the five closest people have of you. So what I mean by that, and we're going a little off target here, but I'll get back to my question in a minute. But if you're in a place where you have five people around you, but none of them are expecting you to do anything with your life, right? If they're none of them are expecting you to stay on the diet that you're saying that you're going to get on, and nobody is expecting you to show up on time, to your meetings or whatever that is, then it's like, okay, you've already defaulted to that being that person in their mind. So there's no real grasp for achievement. Nobody's going to hold you accountable to showing up on time or to stay on that diet that you say you're going to, because there's no expectation that you're going to actually do that. But if those people around you, they do have that expectation that you are gonna show up when you say you're gonna show up, that you are gonna stay on that meal plan and that fitness plan that you said that you were gonna be sticking to. If they have that expectation, then if you for whatever reason don't execute on that, then you are letting them down, and you're letting yourself down because you're falling short of those expectations that other people have of you. So I would encourage people to surround themselves with people that have high expectations of you. That's my own little take on it. Take from it whatever you will, but no, I do love what you said there. But the important thing is really the environment that you are in. You have a conscious choice in a lot of ways to decide what sort of environment you are going to be in and where you're going to spend that time, and that undoubtedly will begin to shape the person that you are becoming, the way that you think, the way that you feel, how you move towards certain goals, how you deal with stress. All of that stuff is going to start to play a part and will begin to shape you based on your environment. And like you said, you spend so much time at your home, or so many of us spend so much time in our home or in a shelter of some sort, right? If you're traveling a lot, it's going to be in different hotel rooms. But for most of us, we spend a lot of time at home, and it is incredibly important to identify those things. So I wanted to thank you for sharing that with us. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we touched base on that a little bit, and pertaining to the home, right? Like we've talked about sense of purpose, security, all those types of things, right? How do they relate to the different places in the home? As you've started to describe in your book, and I've heard you describe it elsewhere, but I'd love for you to tell our listeners, really, because I really do think that it is an important message, and for something to our listeners to consider. But how does that play a part in areas of the home?
So, we touched on the basic program that's been there. I mean, we've had a basic program in the home for for the past 100 years. The basic program of the home has been, a place to eat, place to sleep, place to bathe, and a hangout space. Just these four functions. And that does give you, a sense of physical security. and stability, so that you can just take care of the body and do your business. But it doesn't guarantee, success in you becoming a happy person or a well-rounded individual, or reaching your potential, right? That's just baseline, that's just shelter.
Yeah.
So, once you've achieved baseline shelter, the next question to ask is, well, what do I need to do to develop my higher needs, beyond just my physical, animal needs? And, Maslow, I outlined, that our love and belonging needs, our need for connection with other humans, our personal development needs and self growth, and our creative expression needs. And so when I look at the average home, um, the program hasn't changed in 100 years, with the exception of a home office, which is made possible because of technology. The internet, particularly high speed internet, allowed people to work from home. Prior to the invention of the internet, very few people worked at home. A tiny percentage, of people were able to work from home, doing, because they wrote papers, or they were able to do their business over the phone, and they could, do their work, if they were an author or something, or work on, accounting spreadsheets or whatever, on their computer, or, on timetables. But now that we have the internet, a lot more percentage of people are able to work from home. So that has changed. So it's kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, hangout space, and home office. That's sort of the new program. But with the exception of technology, like smart energy efficient homes, like your thermostat knows it's connected to your cell phone, and it knows when you're coming home. So it says, hey, Taylor's on the way home. Brandon's coming home. Quick, turn the heat up, and get the home conditioned so it's comfortable when they step to the door. These kind of technological things are fantastic. They're great, but they don't guarantee happiness. And so, and then styles have changed. It's like, in the 80s everything was beige and white. Or not in the 80s, but in the 90s everything was beige and white. Which was coming out of the bold colors of the 80s, which was coming out of the drab colors, in the 70s, and then things became gray in the 2000s, and now things and then in the teens, things were fading away from gray and starting to get into sage, everything, and so styles change, and technologies change, but the basic program and function of the home has not changed. But I think it should, because we want people to actually live their best life. The highest calling of architecture is to help people reach their potential, is to help people live happily ever after. That's the goal. Everyone wants to be happy. But happy is a big, vague, nebulous word. What does that actually mean? What does that look like? If you can't break it down and define what happiness looks like, what success in happiness would mean for you as an individual, there's no way. It's a moving target, and you have it's like shooting blindfold. How you don't have much chance. You're going to be lucky if you hit it. So in home design, because we've already established that we're spending so much time in our home and the impact is real. When we dedicate space to certain activities, we open up the door for possibility of success for ourselves, and we remove friction and create opportunity for ourselves. I look at Maslow's hierarchy of human needs pyramid and I say, how could we design a home so that every single need on the hierarchy is intentionally provided for, opportunity for them to get more of that experience in their life, in the home? Because if the home is the perfect starting ground for that, if the home is just thought of as beautiful shelter, then that's all it's going to be. But if you think of the home as one of the most powerful self-growth and personal development tools we have available to us, as long as we just intentionally design it that way, then it could be that. And how much more powerful is that? At the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that sort of decision fatigue and not wanting to have to think about plotting the course out and doing all that stuff. And
Yeah.
you just want to have it set up for you, set up the course so that you can just knock down the pins,
Mhm.
and just get your tasks done. And that's what conscious home design is. Conscious home design is not a chore. Like, you shouldn't have to feel like, oh, what am I going to do? And being at home should feel natural. It should be your sanctuary where you can hang out and relax and do your business and not have to. It should be a place where you can turn off. So the doing this initial work is saying, if I set up the environment to have these things and then I turn off and just go on autopilot and I'm coasting on habits, will I still hit my target of happiness? And so we're setting up the pins so that they automatically get knocked down. If you say, I have a goal to do creative writing and journal because I need to download all this stuff that's in my brain every day as part of my process, whether you're bringing that information to the marketplace or whether it's just for yourself, you're still setting this goal. Hey, I need to journal. I want to spend 20 minutes a day writing stuff down in my book, but you're having a hard time doing that. If you find setting the habit is difficult for you, well, let's see about dedicating a space in your home that's inspiring to you, so that every time you step into that space at a certain time of day, maybe there's sunlight coming into the window, or maybe it's a quiet spot, or maybe it's a spot where it's actually overlooking a bunch of activity that you can feel like you're connected, but still not distracted. Whatever works for your personality and your what you need to get into that creative flow. Let's create that intentionally so that you can more easily actually achieve your goal. It's putting the environment to work for you. It's putting the wind at your back, so that the space automatically helps you reach your goals rather.
This episode is sponsored by New Vision Projects, and everybody has heard the horror stories that happen. They have a friend of a friend or a neighbor that's been renovating for years on end, or they've been building a home and it just hasn't gone the way that it needed to go. Budgets are blown through the roof, timelines, forget about them. New Vision Projects has an incredibly strong track record for over 15 years of working with customers, serving them at the highest level. If you are considering building or renovating, check them out on Instagram at New Vision Projects or at newvisionprojects.com. Building the homes you want with the confidence you need. New Vision has you covered. Let them show you why they're different. Back to the show.
Than having to use your willpower to overcome your environment to do it in spite of the obstacles.
People listening right now, they may be thinking, hey, all of this, this sounds great. And they're picturing this beautiful luxury home that they are dreaming up in their head, and they're picturing all these spaces. It's like, yeah, here's my grotto space. Here's my, my media space. Here's my, connection with my wife's space. Here's my kids' space, their family space, the home office. And all of a sudden you're like, oh man, this becomes like quite a big home and quite an expensive home. But in fact, one of the things that you said at the very beginning was it as long as you have a roof over your head, this way of thinking is something that can really be brought to any home, whether it's a rental home where it's a very small area. You don't even have to own a home, whether you're building a beautiful custom luxury home or a 1,500 square foot bungalow or a 1,000 home, square foot ranch or whatever that is. But what would somebody that maybe has a smaller space, that rental space, and they're like, you know what, I love what he's saying, I want to connect to my home too. I can't afford to hire an architect to design the beautiful custom home that I have on my screensaver on my laptop yet, but right now in my home, in my 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment that I live in with my cat, it feels kind of dungy. The ceilings are kind of low. I can't get into my zone here. It's just not fitting my environment. But this way of thinking, what would some tangible things be that this person may be able to take into consideration to start elevating their own space without having to go through and design a brand new custom home?
Yeah, definitely. So the low-hanging fruit is going to be, different for different people. Some people are going to be like, hey, this particular thing really feeds me and I want more of that. But for another person, they either they're already being fed by that. They already have opportunity for that. So for them, low hanging fruit of what's going to move the needle most is something else, or they may just have a different interest. They may. So what, as they say, one man's trash is another man's treasure. So different people have different desires of what they want. So it starts with just doing an assessment. The conscious home design workbook goes through, it allows you to go through your home, every space in your home, and say, in what ways am I well supported? And in what ways am I less supported? And then you can find the gaps and identify of those gaps, which ones feel like they would be the most impactful if you could make an adjustment and start there. And so you start by doing a self-assessment, and then you look for the opportunities. Now, Maslow's is one of the frameworks, and that's getting into this idea of self-actualization, and being a well-rounded human, and developing yourself in all your different in all your capacities. But the Harvard study of adult happiness showed that throughout the ups and downs of life, and they studied thousands of individuals over the past 80 plus years that the study's been going on. It started in 1938, so I think they're like in the year 88 now. They're on to multiple generations. All the original participants passed on. But what they found is that regardless of your health challenges or your business success or failure, whether you had a big home or a very modest home, all the ups and downs of life, they found that the single biggest predictor of people's happiness and their life expectancy, their very longevity, came back to the quality of their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's very telling. It's very, and intuitively we all say, "Oh, I know that. That makes sense." We all know that's the reason why we get out of bed in the morning. Everything I do is for my family. It's like in all of our, we all say, "My friends and family are the most important thing." We all know this, but without the math and the data proving it to us, hey, prioritize these things and you'll actually live longer statistically, then the urge to spend time with your friends and family, it stays on the wish list. But once we have that proof, that data from the science, it justifies and gives us permission to move it off of the wish list onto our must-have list. And so now we can prioritize that. And so as a designer who's shaping the built environment, I ask myself, well, if relationships, quality connections are the single biggest predictor of our happiness and life expectancy, then what can I do to facilitate and encourage relationship in the home? And relationship is one of those, like happiness, it's this big nebulous word. What does that mean? Relationship, it's too vast. And so I broke it down. I found that all the different relationships, because the Harvard study was very clear that relationship was not limited to just like a romantic partnership. Although for most people, that's our primary. It's, even a single person can live a very long, happy, rich, fulfilled life. So they were very clear to show that even the weak relationship that you may have with that person at the coffee shop, you might not even know their name, but you recognize their face, and they might recognize yours and say, "Hey, it's a Saturday morning routine. Hey, do you want the usual?" They might remember how you take your coffee or what kind of pastry you like. That relationship matters. That's part of the bouquet of connections of your life. So I basically that. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say to that point, I really truly believe that relationships, as you're describing them, also very much relates to community contribution.
Sure.
As well, right? In those relationships, because it's like, okay, how do you do you recognize the mailman or the mail lady that comes, and do you have a quick chat with them? Like that's, that that this is sort of a regular thing, but the ability to show up, because we're very, from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, thousands and thousands of years ago, we're a tribal being, right? It's like, if you can't contribute to the tribe, then there's no place for you. Right. And so there's this sense, I believe, that everybody does want to contribute. in whatever way that they
Yeah.
can. And I think that that is very
Sure.
much a need, a sense of belonging, and that you develop the relationships along the way, and you hold the relationships close to you that you feel are going to either you can contribute to, they can help contribute to you. You can contribute towards things together, but there is very much a sense of belonging and
Hmm.
community that is so powerful. And I quick story, my in-laws, they live in a home, they're about an hour and a half away, and I'm like, they're getting older and I really want them to come out and move into our neighborhood, because there's lots of people their
Hmm.
age. They don't have a lot of friends, and
Hmm.
so getting them out here, and they're just like, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm like, I want you guys to live a little longer. You guys can come out here
Hmm.
and join the fitness club and do the lawn bowling, and like there's so many people out
Hmm.
here that you guys can get to meet.
Hmm.
But there is this, yeah, I think just a sense of belonging, of um,
Hmm.
contribution, like I had mentioned, that's really what gets people out of bed in the morning. Um,
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
my opinion.
Sure. Yeah. People want to connect. Having that isolation, particularly later in life, does for most people end up shortening life, a little bit. But being plugged into a community, um, you know, statistically, the data does show that that helps people live a longer life, and for many reasons. Again, look, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a counselor or a therapist, so I can't step too far out of my zone of expertise here, and talk about these things. There's people that dedicate their whole careers to studying that stuff. My job is just to learn some of those takeaways from these different, professions, and say, well, how can I incorporate that into the built environment so that I can really help people live their best life? And so, the relationships of all the diverse kinds that we have, they're going to fall into three categories: giving, receiving, and reciprocal. We all need to give, but you can't just have a life of nothing but giving. You also need to receive. And then there's also relationships that are reciprocal, where there's an equal give and take. And so, um, looking through the home, I say, well, if we're creating a space that's not just for relationships, but how can we create space that's specifically for a giving relationship? And you may think, oh, well, the kitchen's a place where I prepare food and I share it with others, so it's primarily a giving kind of energy space. Or the family room, that's sort of a place where we're telling stories and hanging out with friends or with each other, and so there's sort of a reciprocal feel in that space. And so some spaces naturally lean themselves towards a certain quality of relationship. But I think that all spaces can potentially uh, support all three kinds of relationship: giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships. And so when we start to do that, then we are opening up the possibilities for our sense of connection. And when we feel like we have, again, opportunity for connection, opportunity to express our creative selves, opportunity to provide value to others, to give and to receive, then life feels more possible. And when you feel that optimism, or you feel that sense of self, and that solidity and confidence in your own 2 feet, then when you do go out into the world, how is that going to change how you show up, and what sort of ripples are going to be sent out, and what's going to come back to you as a result of that? I believe that happy people are better neighbors. It's like, your job isn't to change the world, just try and be happy yourself, and the ripples you send out is automatically going to make the world a better place. If you're worried to death about your survival, then you're probably not caring very much in that moment, if the packaging you got is sustainable, or is destroying the environment, or if the food you're buying is organic. It's like you've got other things that are more pressing than that. But once you achieve a level of, what, things are working for me, I have possibilities in my life, and I'm feeling connected, then you can rise above that sort of survival drive and say, how can I be, you know tread lightly on planet Earth? How can I be a better uh, friend to the people that I come into contact with? And so conscious home design just says, how can I help you live your best life? Because I know if I help people live their best life, they're automatically going to be better citizens and better neighbors and send those ripple effects out into the world. So that's the sort of deeper kind of esoteric philosophy or understanding behind it.
Hell yeah, man. Talor, thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate the conversation, all of the insights, and what you do right in that cross reference point of building and designing beautiful homes on that are great on paper, but also that really resonate with our heart and our soul and our mind is a really unique way of looking at things. So thank you very much for sharing some of your story with us. Really appreciate that. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
Yeah, if people want to get the book and the workbook and the audio book, if they want to listen while they're driving or working out, they can just go to conscioushomedesign.com, and I've got a bundle that people can get as an instant digital download. If people want to pick my brain, they're thinking about a home renovation project, or they've done the workbook and now they want some feedback on it, then there's a contact me form they should fill out, and I'm happy to consult. I do projects all over, coast to coast and top to bottom, and even internationally. I'll do some consulting. So whether you're building a brand new home or you're just doing a few changes to an existing home, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help you. conscioushomedesign.com.
You got it. Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure that we link that up in the show notes for everybody when this comes out. Thank you so much for being here again, all the way, chiming in all the way from Vermont. Really appreciate that. And to all of our listeners that are out there and still with us, as always, I'm here rooting for you to win always. Until next time, stay blessed. Rock and roll. Peace. See ya.